fat man was adjusting the train, made a fatal mistake. He found that the track ahead had not switched to the right track, but to save himself the trouble he doesn't stop the train. Instead, he wants to take the opportunity to run down when the train is running low, manually adjusting the track. He thought he could make it in time, but that's all he thought, and that one little mistake would make him regret it for the rest of his life. Then he shifted gears into coasting mode, but who would have thought? Not only was the gear not fully engaged, but he slid into full forward gear. The fat man was about to adjust the track. The train has started to move at full speed. He was so frightened that he stepped on the track changer, but it was already too late. He had to run after the train, but his size made him fall to the ground. When the worker next to him saw him, instead of helping him, they laughed at his size. Apparently, no one realized how serious the situation really was. A 13,000-ton unmanned steel beast racing down the main railway line. Anything that stands in his way will be completely crushed. The fat man rushed to report the situation to his boss. He said that the train was going at a speed of 10 kilometers per hour at most. When the leader heard how slow it was going, he didn't give it a second thought. But no one expected that the train had already reached 100 kilometers per hour. What's more frightening is that on the opposite side of the train there was a tourist train full of children. There is no time to evacuate the passengers. The two trains will collide head-on in a matter of minutes. When the leaders were told what was really happening, everyone is confused. The collision is imminent. Seasoned veteran drivers at full throttle to the other track, and so the two cars passed each other. The children looked excitedly at the passing train, but they didn't know they just had a brush with death. But the crisis had only just begun. Runaway train loaded with nuclear bombs is in unmanned mode on the main track of the railway at a speed of 500 yards an hour. Like a crab on the tracks, the news quickly spread throughout the city. All the major media outlets were there to grab the TikTok headlines. The media were there to follow the story. The control room was quick to report the situation to their superiors and suggested that the train should be slowed down, but it was rejected because if the 777 was derailed at this point, it would be vulnerable to a nuclear explosion, and that would mean that the entire city. It would have been wiped out by the chemicals released. The top brass called an emergency meeting and decided to send a locomotive to the tracks to stop 777. If nothing else, there will be an accident soon. An old man with hundreds of years of driving experience, risking his life on a mission, but with 500 yards an hour of inertia. The tiny locomotive is no match for it. Soon the train he was driving overturned. The train captain, who was retiring after a lifetime of hard work, died instantly in the massive explosion. The senior management's plan failed, preparing to use the previous dispatcher's plan. In front of the town where the 777 was due to arrive, a large number of derailment devices were laid. FBI saw this and rushed to evacuate the town. Once everything was in place, they waited for the 777 to arrive. But what they didn't expect was, a train appeared in front of them. It's Jack, a veteran driver, and Mike, on his first day of work, and by the time they learned of the runaway train, the 555 they were driving was already less than 10 kilometers away from the 777. Fortunately, there was a track change line in between. Jack reacted quickly and cut in. The pair managed to escape with their lives, but because the train was so long, the last carriage was still smashed to pieces. But just as they passed each other, Jack noticed the 777 connector, and a great idea came to him. Hey, the whole city has put aside their work. They are focused on the same thing, because it's a matter of life and death for the whole city. Whether we can stop this nuclear-armed train of death. It's all about that. Jack immediately dropped all the cars and went backwards to catch it. He hooks the 777's tail with the front of his car, like a tug of war, to slow it down. But the company's executives don't agree, because the derailment device was already in place. No need for them to be heroes. Jack didn't think it could stop the 100-ton beast. If the plan fails again, the train will derail and explode in the next city. A disaster of untold proportions. The 777 would arrive in front of the derailment device just as they finished speaking. And Jack's guess was right. The derailment device was no match for it. Now they can only hope for Jack and Mike. The train is moving at full speed, with only one front end. The pair soon catch up. Jack drives Mike to operate, and the first docking doesn't work. But they didn't give up. They immediately tried a second docking. Luckily, this time it worked, but just as the connector was being locked, Mike was suddenly injured, but time was running out. The 777 is less than 10 kilometers from the next city, and what's worse, you can't go faster than 40 yards on the bend ahead, because of the fuel storage tanks underneath the bend. If the 777 overturns, the consequences are unthinkable. Jack's tires are being dragged around in flames. At the last minute, Mike had a great idea. Turn on the brakes on each car of the 777. It would force it to slow down. Jack quickly does us what he says. It wasn't long before the car was finally slowing down, but it was still going too fast. There's a curve ahead. It was now a matter of fate. Luckily, the train was tilted, but not overturned. They make it through the bend. If nothing else, an accident will happen soon, as the brake discs overheat, causing the brakes to collapse. The 777 starts to speed up again. Jack tries to run into the cockpit to take control, but there's no way to jump over. Suddenly a car lurches out. He told Mike to jump into the back of the car. He goes after the cab of the 777. Mike mustered up the courage to see his chance. Finally, the beast of steel that had been racing down the main road for over 3 hours stopped in its tracks. A catastrophe is over, and the city returned to its former glory. The simplest sense of justice and duty in these people. It wasn't just a crazy train that made them shine. They are the pillars of a world full of greed that will never be destroyed.